The engagement dinner at the Obsidian was meant to unite two of Chicago's most violent families. It was supposed to be the wedding of the century. Instead, it was 5 minutes away from becoming a massacre. Lorenzo Moretti, the most feared man in the city, sat sipping vintage Bollinger, completely unaware that the woman holding his hand had just signaled his execution. But she didn't count on one thing: the invisible girl refilling the water glasses. 1 crumpled napkin. 7 scribbled words. That note didn't just save a life, it started a war that would burn the city to the ground. This is the story of how a waitress outsmarted the mob. The Obsidian was the kind of restaurant where the lighting was dim enough to hide sins, but bright enough to catch the sparkle of diamonds, worth more than a typical house in the suburbs. It sat on the upper tier of Chicago's River North, a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the black water of the river below. Xavier Rossi adjusted the collar of her starch-stiff uniform, fighting the urge to rub her aching lower back. It was 8:45 p.m. Her shift had started 10 hours ago, and her feet were throbbing in the cheap, non-slip shoes she was required to wear. But pain was a luxury she couldn't afford. She needed this job. The tips at the Obsidian were the only thing keeping the eviction notice off the door of her studio apartment in crumbling Cicero. Table 4 needs a refill on the 82 Chateau Margaux. Don't make eye contact. The floor manager, a nervous little man named Gilbert, hissed as he brushed past her. And for God's sake, stop shaking. Xavier took a deep breath, gripped the heavy crystal decanter, and walked out onto the floor. Table 4 was the center of the universe tonight. It was the only table that mattered. Lorenzo Moretti sat at the head. Even facing away from the entrance, he radiated a gravitational pull that made the air around him feel heavier. He was younger than the rumors suggested, maybe 32, with hair the color of midnight and a jawline that looked like it had been cut from granite. He wore a bespoke Brioni suit, charcoal gray, that fit his broad shoulders with military precision. He wasn't eating. He was watching the room with eyes that were terrifyingly still. To his right sat Isabella Vane, the fiancée. Isabella was a vision in emerald silk, her blonde hair cascading down her back like spun gold. She was laughing at something Lorenzo's underboss, a thick-necked man named Marco, had said. It was a beautiful laugh. Light, airy, and completely fake. Xavier had spent her childhood watching her father play poker in smoky basements before he disappeared. She knew a tell when she saw one. Isabella's eyes didn't match her smile. They were darting around the room, checking the exits, checking her watch. Tick, tick, tick. Xavier approached the table moving like a ghost. That was her superpower, invisibility. People like Lorenzo and Isabella didn't see servers. To them, Xavier was just a pair of floating hands delivering alcohol. "More wine, sir?" Xavier asked, her voice barely a whisper. Lorenzo didn't look up. He just tapped the rim of his glass. As Xavier poured the crimson liquid, she saw it. Isabella placed her clutch bag on the table. It was slightly open. Inside the screen of her phone lit up with a single notification. Xavier's eyes flicked down for a fraction of a second. "The north door is locked. Cleaner team in place. 9:00 p.m. Xavier's heart slammed against her ribs. She checked the wall clock above the bar. 8:52 p.m. 8 minutes. She almost dropped the bottle. She stabilized it just in time, but a single drop of red wine splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth. Silence fell over the table. Marco, the underboss, stopped laughing. He looked at the stain, then up at Xavier, with eyes like a shark. "You stupid bitch," he growled, reaching into his jacket. She rushed forward, ignoring Mick's shouting about the broken glass. She dropped to her knees beside Lorenzo. Her hands were rough, her skin smelling of dish soap. She didn't look at his face. She looked at his side, seeing the dark stain spreading. Mick grabbed her shoulder. "Rebecca, leave him. I'm tossing him out." She slapped Mick's hand away with a ferocity that made the large man recoil. She turned her dark eyes to Lorenzo. She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the noise of the diner like a razor blade. "Il sangue non si lava con l'acqua, Don Valenti. Si lava con il sangue." Lorenzo's eyes snapped open, fighting the darkness. "Blood is not washed with water, Don Valenti. It is washed with blood." It was an old phrase, a phrase from the old country, specifically from the villages near Corleone. It was a code, a recognition of status, and a promise of vengeance. "Who?" Lorenzo gasped. "Shut up," Rebecca said in perfect, unaccented English. He was standing by the emergency exit, hand in his pocket, watching Lorenzo. The pieces clicked together in Xavier's mind with horrifying clarity. The north door was the kitchen exit. The cleaner team wasn't a janitorial crew. It was a hit squad. Isabella was excusing herself so she wouldn't be in the line of fire. She wasn't marrying Lorenzo to unite the families. She was serving him up on a platter to take the territory for herself. Xavier retreated to the service station, her hands trembling violently. She should run. She should walk out the front door, hail a cab, and never look back. If she got involved, she was dead. In this city, witnesses didn't go into protection. They went into the river. She looked back at table 4. Lorenzo was alone now. He looked bored, swirling his wine completely exposed. He had saved her from Marco a moment ago. A small kindness from a monster, perhaps, but a kindness nonetheless. 8:56 p.m. "I can't do this," she whispered to herself. "No," Rebecca said, her eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "You have a bullet in you. Hospitals call the cops. The cops call the precinct. And whoever put that hole in you probably owns half the precinct. You're not going to a hospital." Lorenzo tried to laugh, but it came out as a wet cough. She was smart. Smarter than half his lieutenants. They arrived at a crumbling brick building in Queens. It was a walk-up 4th floor. The climb nearly finished him. By the time she unlocked the door to apartment 4B, Lorenzo was dragging his feet, his vision tunneling to a pinprick. She dumped him onto a worn beige sofa. The apartment was tiny, a studio with a kitchenette, but it was clean. The walls were adorned with embroidery hoops, displaying intricate flowers, and birds, a stark contrast to the blood he was currently smearing on her furniture. "I need whiskey," Lorenzo gritted out. "And a needle." "I have vodka and a sewing kit," Rebecca replied, already moving to the kitchen. "Check the kitchen door," Xavier whispered, not moving her lips, pretending to wipe a spot on the table. "The busboy has a gun." Lorenzo didn't look at the kitchen. He didn't look at the note. He looked at her. For the first time, he actually saw her. He saw the terror in her brown eyes, the sweat on her hairline. He saw the truth. He slid the glass over, palmed the note, and read it in a split second. 8:58 p.m. Lorenzo's demeanor changed instantly. The boredom vanished, replaced by the coiled tension of a predator sensing a trap. He didn't panic. He checked his watch. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Marco," Lorenzo called out. Not loud, but sharp. Marco turned around. "Yeah, boss. We're leaving. Now." What Isabella is still in the bathroom. The main course is—" "I said now," Lorenzo commanded. He began to move toward the front entrance, his stride long and purposeful. At that exact moment, the kitchen doors burst open. It wasn't 900 p.m. The hit squad was early. 3 men in black tactical gear and balaclavas stormed out, suppressed submachine guns raised. The busboy by the door pulled a Glock from his waistband. "Get down!" Lorenzo roared, flipping the heavy oak table onto its side. Crack, thwip, thwip, thwip. Bullets shredded the air, tearing into the upholstery and shattering the expensive wine bottles behind the bar. Screams erupted. Patrons crouched under tables. Xavier was frozen in the open, the silver water pitcher still in her hand. She saw the busboy raise his gun, aiming not at Lorenzo, who was behind the table, but at the closest target. Her. She was the witness. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the impact. Suddenly, a powerful hand gripped her arm, yanking her down with bone-bruising force. She hit the floor hard, sliding behind the overturned table just as wood splinters exploded where her head had been a second ago. She looked up. Lorenzo Moretti was crouching over her, a silver chrome pistol in his hand that he had pulled from a shoulder holster. He fired 2 shots over the rim of the table. Bang! Bang! The busboy dropped a hole in his chest. Lorenzo looked down at her, his amber eyes burning. "You have a back way out of here that isn't the kitchen." Xavier nodded, gasping for air. The service elevator. In the pantry." "Lead the way," Lorenzo ordered. "If you want to live, you stay glued to me." "Marco!" Lorenzo yelled. Marco was pinned down behind the bar, returning fire. "Go, boss. I'll hold them." Lorenzo didn't hesitate. He grabbed Xavier's hand. His grip was like iron and pulled her into a crouch run. "Move!" They scrambled across the floor, glass crunching under their feet. Bullets whizzed past them, destroying the serene luxury of the obsidian. They reached the pantry door. Xavier fumbled with her keycard, her fingers slipping on the plastic. "Come on!" Lorenzo growled, glancing back as the 3 tactical gunmen advanced across the dining room. The light turned green. Beep! Xavier shoved the door open. They fell inside just as a hail of bullets chewed up the doorframe. Lorenzo slammed the heavy steel door shut and locked the deadbolt. "The elevator," he demanded. "Here." Xavier pressed the button. They stood in the dark, smelling of gunpowder and expensive cologne. The sounds of slaughter were muffled outside. Lorenzo turned to her. He loomed over her in the tight space. He grabbed her chin, tilting her face up to the dim emergency light. He studied her face as if memorizing a map. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Xavier. Just Xavier." "Well, just Xavier," Lorenzo said as the elevator doors pinged open. "You just made a very powerful enemy. Isabella won't stop until we're both dead." He pulled her into the elevator. "Welcome to the family." The service elevator descended with a groan that sounded like a dying animal. The air inside was thick, recycled, and smelled faintly of rotting vegetables. Lorenzo Moretti stood with his back to the steel wall, his chest heaving slightly, the silver pistol held at a low ready. He checked the magazine. 7 rounds, he muttered more to himself than to Xavier. "Standard clip. I have 1 spare in my pocket. That's 14 bullets against an army." Xavier was huddled in the corner, clutching her apron. Her hands were shaking so badly, her teeth had started to chatter. They were going to kill everyone. "No," Lorenzo corrected his voice, devoid of emotion. "Just me." and anyone standing near me. Collateral damage is just a line item on a spreadsheet to people like Isabella. The elevator jolted to a halt at the basement level, the loading dock. "Listen to me," Lorenzo said, stepping in front of her. He was tall, easily 6'2", and the smell of gunpowder on him was mixed with sandalwood and expensive scotch. "When these doors open, we run. Do you have a car?" Xavier blinked, trying to focus. Yes, I do. It's parked in the employee lot, around the back. Give me the keys." I can drive." Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. "I don't ride in the passenger seat, Xavier." "Keys?" "It's a stick shift," she blurted out. "The starter is tricky. You have to jiggle the key while you turn it, or it floods the engine." Lorenzo stared at her for a second, incredulous. The absurdity of the situation seemed to hit him. The king of Chicago arguing about a flooded engine while hitmen were hunting him down. "Fine," he snapped. "You drive. But if you freeze, I'm throwing you out and driving myself." The doors slid open. The loading dock was a cavernous concrete bay filled with dumpsters and delivery trucks. It was dimly lit by flickering yellow sodium bulbs. "Clear," Lorenzo whispered. They moved fast, hugging the shadows of the delivery trucks. The cold Chicago wind whipped through the open bay doors, biting through Xavier's thin uniform. They burst out into the alleyway. The night air was filled with the distant wail of sirens, police finally responding to the chaos upstairs. But the police were the least of their worries. "There," Xavier pointed. Parked under a flickering street lamp was a 2009 Honda Civic. It was silver, or at least it had been once. Now it was a patchwork of rust spots, a mismatched red bumper, and a duct-taped silhouette. Side mirror. Lorenzo stopped dead. He looked at the car, then at Xavier. "You're joking." "It runs," Xavier said defensively, unlocking the door. "Get in." Lorenzo squeezed his large frame into the passenger seat, his knees pressing against the dashboard. The interior smelled of vanilla air freshener and old coffee. It was a far cry from the armored Maybach he had arrived in. Xavier jumped in, jammed the key into the ignition, and did exactly what she said. She jiggled the key violently while turning it. The engine sputtered, wheezed, and then roared to life with a hole in the muffler rumble that sounded like a tractor. "Go," Lorenzo commanded, looking in the side mirror. As Xavier threw the car into reverse, the back door of the restaurant, the one they had just exited, slammed open. Two men in tactical gear burst out. "Down!" Lorenzo yelled, grabbing the back of her neck and forcing her head toward the steering wheel. He leaned across her, firing 2 shots through her open window. Pop, pop. The windshield of the Civic shattered as a return bullet punched a spiderweb hole right between the seats. Xavier screamed, slamming her foot on the gas. The car lurched backward, tires screeching on the wet asphalt. She spun the wheel through it into first and peeled out of the alleyway, clipping a dumpster on the way out. They shot onto the street, merging recklessly into the Friday night traffic of River North. "Where are we going?" Xavier shouted over the roar of the broken muffler and the wind rushing through the shattered windshield. "Lower Wacker Drive," Lorenzo ordered, holstering his weapon and pulling out his phone. "We lose them in the underground. Then I need to make a call." Xavier swerved around a taxi running a red light. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but a strange, cold focus was settling over her. Survival mode. She knew these streets. She knew which lanes moved fastest and which lights were long. They plunged into the tunnel system of Lower Wacker Drive. The GPS signal died, and the city lights above vanished, replaced by the dystopian concrete pillars and yellow gloom of the underworld. It was a drag racer's paradise and a criminal's highway. Lorenzo was tapping furiously on his phone. His brow furrowed. "Damn it," he hissed. "What? No signal." And he stared at the screen. "My passcode isn't working. She locked me out." She remotely wiped the secure server. He looked up, a dawn of realization breaking over his face. This wasn't just a hit. It was a coup. She has my codes. She has the accounts. He rolled down the window and threw the phone out. It skittered across the pavement and was crushed instantly by a passing delivery truck. "Why did you do that?" Xavier asked, glancing at him. "If she has the codes, she has the tracker. That phone is a beacon." He ran a hand through his hair, ruining the perfect styling. He looked at Xavier. "You have a phone in my bag, in the back seat." Lorenzo reached back, grabbing her worn canvas backpack. He rummaged through it, ignoring her personal items, a spare uniform, a sketchbook, a bottle of ibuprofen, and found her cracked iPhone. Passcode 1125. He unlocked it. "Who tracks you boyfriend parents?" "No one," Xavier said quietly. "Just me." Lorenzo paused for a beat, looking at her profile. "Good." He dialed a number from memory. Xavier took a sharp left tires, squealing, heading toward the exit that would dump them onto Lakeshore Drive. "Who are you calling?" "The only man I can trust. My capo Vinny. If Isabella moved on me, she probably moved on him too, but Vinny is hard to kill." The phone rang on speaker. Once, twice, 3 times. Click. "Yeah." A gruff voice answered. It sounded strained. "Vinny, it's me." Silence, heavy and thick. "Boss?" Vinny's voice cracked. "Jesus Christ. The word is out. You're dead. Isabella told the commission you took 2 to the chest. She said the Irish did it. She's rallying the soldiers right now to launch a counterattack on the O'Malleys." Lorenzo let out a dark, humorless laugh. "Of course she is. She kills me, blames my rivals, and uses my army to wipe them out. She takes the whole city in one night. Boss, you gotta get to the safe house on 35th, the brownstone. I'm heading there now. I got Luca and Tony with me. We're loading up." 35th, Lorenzo repeated. "Okay, I'm 20 minutes out." "Wait," Vinny said. "How are you getting there? The Maybach?" "No, I'm in a civilian transport." "Okay, keep your head down. We'll be ready." The line went dead. Lorenzo looked at Xavier. "Change of plans. 35th Street, Bridgeport." Xavier's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Bridgeport? That's south side. That's deep." "Just drive, Xavier." The drive south was tense. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, shaking dread. Xavier stole glances at the man next to her. Lorenzo Moretti. She had seen his face in the newspapers, usually in the society pages, or blurred out in crime reports. He was a myth, a ghost story, and now he was bleeding onto her passenger seat. "You're hurt," she said, noticing a dark stain spreading on the left shoulder of his grey suit. Lorenzo glanced at it. "Graze. From the table splinters, or maybe a ricochet. It's nothing." "It doesn't look like nothing. Drive the car, waitress. My name is Xavier." "I know," he said, looking out the window at the passing skyline. "Xavier Rossi. You worked at the Obsidian for 8 months. Before that, a diner in Cicero. Your father was a gambler named Carlo. who died owing money to the outfit 5 years ago. Your mother passed when you were 10. You have no siblings. You live alone. Xavier nearly swerved into the median. She stared at him, horror washing over her. How do you know that? Lorenzo turned to her, his face unreadable. I know everyone who serves my food, Xavier. I don't sit down at a table unless my security team has vetted everyone within 50 feet. I knew who you were before you poured the first glass of wine. If you knew who I was, why did you drink the water? Because you were the only person in that room who didn't want anything from me, Lorenzo said softly. You were just doing your job. And because you have your father's eyes. Carlo was a degenerate gambler, but he was an honest one. Xavier felt a lump form in her throat. She gripped the wheel tighter. So what happens now? You go to your safe house, and I go home. Lorenzo didn't answer immediately. He watched the streetlights flicker past. You can't go home, Xavier. They know who you are now. Isabella saw you. The busboy saw you. If you go back to your apartment, you'll be dead before you unlock the door. So I'm stuck with you until I kill Isabella. Yes, you're stuck with me. They pulled up to the address in Bridgeport. It was a row of classic Chicago brownstones, unassuming and quiet. The street was dark. Park down the block, Lorenzo ordered. Keep the engine running. I can't, Xavier said. It's a stick. If I stop, I have to turn it off. Fine. Just stay here. Lorenzo checked his pistol again. He opened the car door and stepped out into the chilly night. He moved with a predatory grace despite his injury. He walked toward the third house on the left. The house was dark. Too dark. Xavier watched through the cracked windshield, holding her breath. Lorenzo walked up the steps. He didn't knock. He reached into a flower pot, presumably for a key, but then stopped. The front door was slightly ajar. Xavier saw Lorenzo stiffen. He drew his gun. He pushed the door open with his foot and disappeared inside. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. Xavier's heart was pounding. Ran a voice in her head, screamed, "Drive away! Go to the police!" But she knew the police were on Isabella's payroll. Everyone knew that. Suddenly, a gunshot cracked the silence of the neighborhood. Then another. Xavier ducked. The front door flew open. Lorenzo stumbled out, walking backward, firing into the house. "Go, go, go!" he roared, sprinting toward the car. He dove into the passenger seat, just as a man appeared in the doorway. Vinny. But Vinny wasn't helping him. Vinny was holding a shotgun. "Sorry, boss," Vinny shouted, raising the weapon. She offered double. Boom! The shotgun blast took out the rear window of the Honda, showering the back seat in glass. Xavier screamed and floored it. The car fish-tailed tires smoking as she sped down the narrow residential street. "He set you up," Xavier yelled, tears streaming down her face. "Your friend set you up." Lorenzo was slumped in the seat, breathing hard. He looked pale. The betrayal hurt more than the bullet wound. His inner circle wasn't just compromised, it was gone. He was alone. The king had fallen. "Vinny," Lorenzo whispered, closing his eyes for a second. Then he snapped them open, the amber fire returning. "Okay, no more safe houses. No more friends." He looked at Xavier, the waitress, the nobody. The only person who hadn't tried to sell him out tonight. "Where do we go?" Xavier cried, navigating a sharp turn. "They know the car. We can't stay on the streets." Lorenzo looked at her, his expression grim. "We need a place where the Mafia doesn't look. A place where money doesn't talk. Xavier swallowed hard. She looked at the gas gauge. Quarter tank. I know a place, she said, her voice trembling but determined. But you're going to hate it. Is it safe? It's invisible, like me. Lorenzo nodded, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Take me there. Xavier turned the wheel heading west, away from the skyline, away from the penthouses and the power. They were heading to the Cicero border, to the crumbling industrial parks and the forgotten motels where people went to disappear. The Starlight Motel was a relic of the 1970s that had never seen a renovation. The neon sign buzzed with an annoying hum, the Issas and T burnt out, so it just read, Our Light Motel. It sat on the edge of an industrial district in Cicero, surrounded by chain-link fences and weed-choked lots. Xavier parked the battered Honda behind a dumpster in the back lot. She killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. This is it, Lorenzo asked, looking out at the peeling paint and the flickering lights of room 104. My aunt owns it, Xavier said, unbuckling her seatbelt. She's eccentric. She doesn't ask questions, and she doesn't take credit cards. Cash only, no paper trail. Lorenzo nodded, impressed despite himself. Smart. He tried to open the door, but his arm gave out. He grunted, pain flashing across his face. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the reality of his injuries was setting in. Xavier was at his side in a second. She opened the door and helped him out. He was heavy, leaning a significant portion of his weight on her. She could feel the heat radiating from him. You're burning up, she noted. I'm fine, he lied. They made their way to the back office. A woman with hair dyed a shocking shade of purple and a cigarette dangling from her lip looked up from a portable TV. Xavier. She squinted through the smoke. What are you doing here? It's Friday night. Shouldn't you be serving rich pricks? Aunt Marge, I need a room. The back one. Number 12. Marge looked at Lorenzo taking in the blood-soaked designer suit, the gun bulge under his arm, and the look of sheer, unadulterated danger in his eyes. He in trouble? Marge asked, not looking surprised. Yes, Xavier said. Bad trouble. The worst. Marge took a drag of her cigarette, then reached under the counter and tossed a key with a heavy plastic tag. Room 12. There's a first aid kit under the sink. And Xavier, yeah. If he dies in there, you're cleaning the carpet. Thanks, Marge. They hobbled to room 12. It was small, smelling of lemon polish and stale cigarettes, but it was clean. Xavier helped Lorenzo to the bed. He sat down heavily, wincing as he took off his jacket. The white dress shirt underneath was soaked red at the shoulder. I need to get the bullet out, Lorenzo said through gritted teeth. It's lodged. If I don't, infection sets in by morning. Xavier stared at the wound. She felt bile rise in her throat. I'm a waitress, Lorenzo, not a doctor. You have small hands, Lorenzo said, looking at her. Steady hands. I saw you pour that wine while Marco was screaming at you. You didn't spill a drop until he startled you. I can't do surgery. You have to, Lorenzo said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a switchblade. He flicked it open. Sanitize this. Use the vodka from the minibar. And I need towels. Xavier stood frozen. Xavier, Lorenzo said, his voice softening. Please. It was the please that did it. The mighty Lorenzo Moretti was begging. Xavier moved. She grabbed the first aid kit, the towels, and the mini bottle of Smirnoff. She poured the alcohol over the blade and over the wound. Lorenzo hissed, but didn't scream. Do it, he commanded. Xavier took a deep breath. She visualized the task. It wasn't flesh. It was just a problem to be solved, like a cork in a bottle. She worked for 10 agonizing minutes. Lorenzo gripped the bedsheet so hard he tore the fabric. Sweat poured down his face. Finally, with a sickening clink, the flattened bullet dropped into the metal wastebasket. Lorenzo let out a long, shuddering breath and slumped back against the pillows. Xavier quickly bandaged the wound, wrapping it tight. She washed her hands in the sink scrubbing until the water ran clear. Then she slumped into the armchair in the corner. For a long time, neither of them spoke. "Thank you," Lorenzo said, his voice raspy. Xavier looked at him. He looked vulnerable now. The suit was ruined, his hair messy, his face pale. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a man who had lost everything. "Why did she do it?" Xavier asked quietly. "Isabella. She had everything. You were giving her everything." Lorenzo stared at the ceiling. "Power is a hungry beast, Xavier. It's never enough. Isabella, her father was a boss before my father took over. She always believed the crown belonged to her bloodline. She played the part of the loving fiancée for 3 years. 3 years she waited for the perfect moment." He turned his head to look at her. "She made one mistake, though." "What?" "She underestimated the help. She treated you like furniture, and that furniture just saved my life." Xavier managed a weak smile. "I'm not furniture." "No," Lorenzo said, intense. "You're not. You're something else." The moment hung in the air, charged and confusing. Xavier felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "Get some sleep," Lorenzo said, closing his eyes. "I'll take the first watch. You're almost unconscious. I'll sleep when I'm dead, which according to the news I already am." Xavier didn't argue. She curled up in the chair, pulling her knees to her chest. She watched him. His breathing evened out. The gun was still in his hand, resting on his chest. She drifted into a fitful sleep. She woke up to the sound of clicking. Sunlight was streaming through the heavy curtains. Lorenzo was sitting at the small desk, his shirt off, revealing a torso of lean muscle and scars. He was reassembling his gun. He looked better. The color had returned to his face. "Morning," he said without looking up. "What time is it?" 10 a.m. "I borrowed your aunt's laptop." He spun the computer around. On the screen was a news report. The headline read, "Gangland Massacre at the Obsidian. Moretti crime boss presumed dead. Isabella Vane vows justice." There was a video of Isabella looking tearful and elegant in black, speaking to reporters. "Lorenzo was the love of my life," she sobbed on screen. "These animals, these O'Malley thugs, they took him from me. I will not rest until justice is served." Lorenzo shut the laptop. "She's good. I'll give her that. She's consolidating power. By tonight, every captain in the city will have sworn loyalty to her, to avenge my death." "So what do we do?" Xavier asked, standing up and stretching. Her back cracked. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. "You should go, Xavier. Take your car. Go to a different state. Change your name. I can get you cash." "And what will you do?" "I'm going to take back my city," Lorenzo said, standing up. "I'm going to burn her kingdom down piece by piece. Alone. I work better alone." "You almost died alone yesterday," Xavier pointed out. "You need eyes. You need someone who can go places you can't. Everyone knows Lorenzo Moretti. No one knows Xavier Rossi." Lorenzo studied her. He walked closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of soap and danger. He reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was electric. "Why would you help me?" he whispered. "I'm a criminal. I'm the bad guy." "Maybe," Xavier said, her heart pounding. "But you're the only one who didn't treat me like I was invisible." Lorenzo stared at her for a long moment. Then a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "All right, partner," he said. "Get dressed. We have a war to start." "Where do we start?" "Isabella has a weakness," Lorenzo said, picking up his jacket. "She's greedy. She keeps her leverage, the blackmail, the deeds, the real accounts in a physical ledger. She doesn't trust the cloud. She keeps it in a safe at her private club, the Velvet Room." "The Velvet Room?" Xavier asked. "That exclusive members-only place downtown?" "Exactly. I can't walk in there. I'm dead, and even if I wasn't, the security would spot me a mile away." He looked at Xavier. "But they're hiring," he said. "I saw the ad on your aunt's laptop. They need waitresses for the masquerade ball tonight." Xavier understood immediately. She straightened her spine. "I can get in," she said. "Good," Lorenzo said. "Because tonight we're going to steal the keys to the city." The Velvet Room was a suffocating paradise of red silk and gold leaf. The masquerade ball was in full swing, a sea of anonymous faces hiding the city's most corrupt elite. Xavier adjusted the uncomfortable domino mask on her face, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She wasn't invisible tonight. She was terrified. "Breathe." Lorenzo's voice crackled in her hidden earpiece. He was parked 2 streets away in a stolen Audi watching the thermal feeds. "You are just scenery. They don't see you. Get to the 3rd floor." Xavier gripped her serving tray, tighter, navigating the crowd. She spotted Isabella Vane on the VIP balcony. The woman was unmasked, wearing grief like a designer gown holding court with corrupt judges and cartel liaisons. She looked triumphant. Xavier slipped past the guards, feigning a clumsy stumble that made them look away in annoyance, and ducked into the service corridor. The noise of the party faded, replaced by the hum of the HVAC system. She sprinted to the heavy mahogany door at the end of the hall, Isabella's private office. "I'm at the door," Xavier whispered. "The keypad," Lorenzo directed. "Use the UV light." Xavier shone the small purple light on the pad. Grease from Isabella's fingers illuminated 4 numbers, 1027. 1027, Xavier read. October 27th. Lorenzo's voice went cold. Yesterday's date. The day she tried to kill me. She's sentimental. Xavier punched in the code. Click. Green light. She slipped inside. The office smelled of expensive lilies and betrayal. The black ledger was right there on the desk, brazenly exposed. Isabella was so arrogant she hadn't even locked it in the safe. Xavier grabbed the heavy book, her fingers trembling. This was it. The names, the bank accounts, the proof of every bribe. Suddenly the doorknob turned. Xavier froze. There was nowhere to hide. She dropped behind the high-backed leather chair just as the door swung open. Isabella walked in, followed by Marco. "The Colombian shipment docks at midnight," Isabella was saying, her voice sharp. "I want the O'Malleys wiped out before the crates are even opened. With Lorenzo gone, the city is ours." She walked to the desk. Silence stretched thick and suffocating. "Where is it?" Isabella's voice pitched up. "The book. I left it right here." Xavier held her breath, clutching the ledger to her chest. Isabella rounded the desk. Her eyes landed on the floor behind the chair. She screamed. "You!" Isabella shrieked, recognizing the waitress instantly. "Kill her, Marco!" Marco drew his gun. "Window!" Lorenzo roared in Xavier's ear. Xavier didn't think. She grabbed a heavy bronze bust from the side table and hurled it through the floor-to-ceiling glass. It shattered with a deafening crash. As Marco fired the bullet, tearing through the leather chair, Xavier jumped. She fell 10 feet, crashing onto the fabric awning of the balcony below, rolling hard onto the concrete terrace. Pain exploded in her ankle, but the adrenaline was stronger. She scrambled over the railing, sliding down a drain pipe into the alleyway, just as Marco appeared at the shattered window above, firing blindly into the dark. A black Audi screeched around the corner, passenger door flying open. "Get in!" Lorenzo yelled. Xavier dove into the car, gasping for air, the ledger safe in her lap. As they sped away, tires smoking, she looked at Lorenzo. He wasn't looking at the road. He was looking at her with a mix of awe and terrifying intensity. "You're insane," he breathed. "I got it," she panted, holding up the book. "I got the kingdom." They didn't go back to the motel. It wasn't safe anymore. Lorenzo drove south, deep into the industrial wasteland of the ironworks district. They pulled into a massive abandoned shipyard, the skeletal remains of cranes looming like steel dinosaurs against the moon. "Where are we?" Xavier asked, limping as she got out of the car. Her ankle was swollen, and she had a cut on her cheek from the glass. "The Hollows," Lorenzo said. "This is where the ghosts live. Men who were too loyal, too old, or too principled for Isabella's new world order." He led her into a rusted hangar. Inside, around a burning oil drum, stood a dozen men. They looked rough-scarred, tired, wearing faded leather jackets. But when Lorenzo stepped into the light, they all straightened up. A massive man with a grey beard and a prosthetic arm stepped forward. This was Dante, the former enforcer, who Isabella had cast out 2 years ago. "I heard you were dead, Enzo." Dante rumbled, his voice like grinding gravel. "Disappointed?" Lorenzo asked. "Surprised," Dante corrected. He looked at Xavier, then at the ledger in her hands. "And who is the girl?" "This is Xavier," Lorenzo said, his voice ringing with authority. "And she just stole Isabella's soul." Lorenzo took the ledger and threw it onto a crate. "It's all in there, Dante. The judges she bought, the cops on her payroll, and the location of the shipment tonight. She's moving 50 million in product at Pier 4. We hit her there, we end her." Dante flipped through the book. A slow, wolfish grin spread across his face. "We don't have the numbers, Enzo. She has an army." "She has mercenaries," Lorenzo countered. "I have you. I have men who fight for loyalty, not a paycheck. And we have the element of surprise. They think I'm fish food." Dante looked at his men. They nodded, checking their weapons. "All right, we ride at midnight." While the men prepared for war, Lorenzo pulled Xavier into a small foreman's office to the side. He found a first aid kit and sat her down on a dusty desk. "Let me see the ankle," he said softly. He knelt before her, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he unlaced her shoe. He wrapped the swelling joint with efficient movements. The air in the small room grew heavy, charged with the electricity that had been building between them since the restaurant. Xavier watched him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a weary determination. He looked up, catching her gaze. "You didn't have to jump," he said quietly. "I would have come for you." "I know," Xavier whispered. "That's why I jumped. I didn't want you to die trying." Lorenzo stood up, stepping into her personal space. He reached out his thumb, brushing the cut on her cheek, tracing the line of her jaw. His eyes searched hers, looking for fear, but finding only fire. "I have spent my whole life building walls," Lorenzo murmured, "trusting no one. And then a waitress spills wine on my table and saves my life twice in 24 hours. 3 times. Xavier corrected her breath, hitching. If you count the note. I'm counting, he said. He leaned in, and for a moment the war outside didn't exist. He kissed her hard, desperate and consuming. It tasted of danger and promise. It was a seal, a silent vow, that if they survived this night, there would be no going back. He pulled away slowly, his forehead resting against hers. Stay here. Stay safe. Dante has a boat ready to take you out of the city if this goes wrong. Xavier grabbed his lapels, pulling him back. No, I have the book. I know how to read the codes. You need me to bypass the security at the pier. I'm coming with you. Lorenzo looked like he wanted to argue to lock her in this room and protect her, but he nodded. Then stay behind me, he commanded. Always behind me. Pier 4 was a fortress. Floodlights cut through the mist as forklifts moved massive wooden crates from a cargo ship to a waiting convoy of trucks. Isabella Vane stood in the center of the operation, flanked by Marco and 30 armed mercenaries. She looked at her watch. 12:15 a.m. Move faster, she screamed. I want this cleared before sunrise. She didn't see the shadows moving in the shipping container maze above her. Lorenzo Dante and the ghosts had infiltrated silently. Xavier was crouched on a catwalk 40 feet above, plugged into the port's electronic control box. Her hands shook, but she typed the override commands Lorenzo had memorized. Now, Xavier, Lorenzo whispered in her ear. Xavier hit enter. Suddenly, every floodlight in the harbor exploded into darkness. Chaos erupted below. It's a raid, someone screamed. Then the emergency red lights flared on, bathing the pier in the color of blood. And from the shadows, Lorenzo stepped out, a silver pistol in each hand. Hello, Bella, he shouted, his voice echoing over the confused shouting. Isabella froze. She stared at him as if seeing a demon. Lorenzo, you missed, he said. Gunfire erupted. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Dante's men, veterans of a dozen gang wars, fired with precision from the high ground. Isabella's mercenaries, paid only for intimidation, panicked and broke formation. Lorenzo moved through the firefight like a wraith, dropping 2 guards before they could raise their rifles. He had only one target. Marco saw him coming. The underboss roared, charging Lorenzo with a combat knife, his gun jammed. Lorenzo didn't flinch. He sidestepped Marco's clumsy slash, grabbed his wrist, and broke it with a sickening crunch. He spun Marco around and kicked him off the pier into the freezing black water below. Isabella was running. She scrambled toward her armored limousine, clutching a briefcase of cash. She reached the door, but it wouldn't open. The electronic locks were dead. Looking for this... Isabella spun around. Xavier stood on top of a shipping container, holding the remote override tablet. She looked down at the woman who had terrorized the city, no longer a waitress, but a queen in her own right. Isabella snarled, pulling a small pistol from her purse. She aimed at Xavier. Bang! Isabella dropped the gun, clutching her shoulder, screaming. Lorenzo stood 20 feet away, his weapon smoking. He walked toward her slowly, the chaotic sounds of the battle dying down as Dante's men secured the perimeter. Isabella fell to her knees, looking up at him, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time, tears of fear. Enzo, please, she sobbed. I did it for us. The power. It makes people crazy. I can fix this. We can rule together. Lorenzo looked down at her. He looked at the woman he had almost married. Then he looked up at the shipping container where Xavier was climbing down, her face smudged with grease and blood, looking at him with absolute trust. "I already have a partner," Lorenzo said coldly. Sirens wailed in the distance. Real police, not the ones on Isabella's payroll. Those names had already been leaked to the FBI an hour ago by Xavier. "You're not going to kill me," Isabella hissed. "No," Lorenzo said, holstering his gun. "Death is too easy. You're going to prison Bella. And with the ledger we gave the feds, you're going to be the poorest woman in cell block C." He turned his back on her. Xavier ran to him, and he caught her, lifting her off her feet in a crushing embrace. "It's over," he whispered into her hair. The red lights of the pier reflected in the water. The king had returned, but the rules had changed. He wasn't ruling alone anymore. The waitress who had slipped a note had just helped him rewrite history. 6 months had passed since the night the pier turned red. Chicago was freezing, buried under 2 feet of snow, but inside the newly renovated Obsidian, the atmosphere was warm and electric. The restaurant had been closed for repairs, officially due to structural issues, unofficially due to bullet holes. But tonight was the grand reopening. The guest list was different this time. The corrupt judges and slimy politicians were gone, swept away by the FBI indictments that followed the release of Isabella's ledger. In their place were new faces, loyal captains, legitimate business partners, and the people of the neighborhood who Lorenzo had quietly started protecting. Xavier stood at the top of the grand staircase. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She was wearing a midnight blue gown that shimmered like the night sky cut to showcase the faint, thin scar on her ankle, a battle wound she refused to hide. She wasn't a ghost anymore. She was the most visible woman in the city. "Nervous?" A deep voice rumbled beside her. Lorenzo appeared, stepping out of the shadows. He looked different, too. The tension that used to coil around his shoulders was gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence. He wore a tuxedo that fit perfectly, but he no longer checked the exits every 5 seconds. He didn't have to. Dante's men were at every door, and they answered to Xavier just as much as they answered to him. "I'm not nervous." Xavier smiled, smoothing her dress. "I'm just remembering. Remembering what, the last time I stood here, I was invisible. I was holding a tray of champagne and praying my shoes wouldn't fall apart." Lorenzo took her hand, kissing the knuckles. "And now you own the place." It was true. The deed to the Obsidian was in her name, a gift Lorenzo had said for saving his life. But it was more than a gift. It was a statement. Touch her, and you die. They walked down the stairs together. The room went silent. Respect, fear, awe. It was a potent mix. As they moved through the tables greeting guests, Xavier spotted something out of the corner of her eye. At table 4, the same table where it all began, a young new waitress was trembling. She had just accidentally knocked over a salt shaker near a heavy-set captain named Tony the Hammer. Tony looked up, annoyed. "Watch it, kid." The girl looked terrified. I'm sorry, sir." Xavier stopped. She let go of Lorenzo's arm. She walked over to table 4. The room held its breath. The queen was moving. Xavier placed a hand on the young waitress's shoulder. The girl flinched. "It's okay," Xavier said softly. She looked at Tony. Her eyes were hard, flashing with the same amber fire she had learned from Lorenzo. "Is there a problem here, Tony?" Tony looked at Xavier. He saw the steel behind the beauty. He swallowed hard. "No, Miss Xavier. No problem. Just clumsy me. I bumped the table. Good, Xavier said. She turned to the waitress. Go get a fresh shaker, and take a breath. You're doing fine. The girl looked at Xavier with worshipful eyes. Thank you, ma'am. Xavier walked back to Lorenzo, who was watching her with a smirk. You're terrifying, he whispered. I learned from the best, she replied. They moved to the balcony overlooking the icy Chicago River. The wind was biting, but Lorenzo wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. The commission called today, Lorenzo said, looking out at the city lights. And they want to make peace. They know the territory is secure. They know we have the police, the docks, and the unions. They want to formally recognize the new leadership. The new leadership, Xavier repeated. You. Us, Lorenzo corrected. He turned to face her. I ruled by fear. For 10 years. It worked, but it was lonely, and it almost got me killed. You taught me that loyalty is stronger than fear. He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a small velvet box. I don't do romance well, Xavier. You know that. I'm a criminal. I have blood on my hands. I can't promise you a normal life. There will always be wolves at the door. He opened the box. Inside sat a diamond that looked like a shard of ice, sharp and flawless. But I can promise you this, Lorenzo said, his voice rough with emotion. I will never let you be invisible again. I will burn the world down before I let anyone hurt you. Be my partner. Be my wife. Be the boss. Xavier looked at the ring, then at the man who had dragged her into the darkness only to show her the stars. She thought about the note she had slipped him. Your fiancé. Set a trap. Leave now. She smiled a dangerous, happy smile. You're asking for trouble, Lorenzo Moretti, she whispered. I'm counting on it. He grinned. She took the ring and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Yes, she said. Lorenzo kissed her, and for the first time in the history of the Chicago outfit, the boss didn't watch the door. He didn't check the shadows. He just held the woman who had saved his soul while the city below bowed to its new king and queen. The waitress had tipped the balance, and the Mafia would never be the same. And that is the story of Xavier and Lorenzo. From a crumpled note on a napkin to ruling the Chicago underworld, it proves that sometimes the smallest act of courage can change destiny. Xavier went from being invisible to being invincible, not because she learned to shoot a gun, but because she learned that her voice mattered. If you enjoyed this Mafia romance, full of twists, betrayal, and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next dramatic story. Until next time, stay safe and watch who you trust.